Okay, thank you everybody for joining this webinar today. My name is Harrison Donahue and I am a strategic account manager for the Qt company. And today I'm going to be talking to you guys about a modern approach to a consistent look and feel across your complete product family. Before I dive in, I'll give you guys a little bit of context around who I am. So I started my career in embedded development for consumer IoT applications. I was building home automation products in a B2B channel, devices that were professionally installed and needed a sort of focus on that experience for the initial installer and for troubleshooting, but also, of course, on the end consumer, as these are devices that are going in the home and were interacted with pretty much every day. Just shortly over a year ago, I joined the Qt company to oversee and grow the Qt for MCU's product offering here in the Americas specifically. And I also manage the relationship with a variety of strategic partners that play in various IoT relevant markets, such as home appliances, security, fitness, and some enterprise solutions. So to give you guys a look at the agenda of what I'm going to cover today, I'm going to start with the state of the embedded industry. I'm going to dive a bit into a white paper of a study done by Forrester, commissioned by Qt from May of this year. Then we're going to look at the different UI design approaches across a variety of platforms. We'll talk a bit about the latest UI UX trends that have been relevant in 2021 and going into next year, 2022. And then we'll cover this modern approach to a scalable look and feel using Qt. And lastly, we'll wrap it all up with a smart oven demo that covers multiple platforms and incorporates a bunch of these UI UX trends. So before we get into it, just briefly, I'll bring all of you up to speed. For those of you that are not familiar with Qt, just an overview of who we are and what we do. We are a software company that offers a software development framework. The company headquarters is in Espoo, Finland, but you can see we've got a global footprint with several offices here in the United States between Boston, Detroit, San Jose, and Dallas, which is an emerging office for us. We also have a number sprinkled around Europe, India, and the rest of Asia. We have just over 455 employees. Of our commercial customers, we've got about 5,000 of those. And with our open source licensing model in conjunction, we've got just over 1 million users. After doing this for about 20 years, we have finally reached a milestone of 1 billion devices deployed to the field running Qt, which is very exciting. And to give you guys a snapshot of the Qt development environment. Now, our framework, we offer a cross-platform development framework which enables product teams to design, develop, test, and deploy their applications to virtually any platform, including desktop, which is where we got our start, embedded, mobile, and now web with Qt WebAssembly. Now, when we use the term framework, that's a vast collection of libraries and APIs, not only for graphics, which is what we're well known for, but also our core libraries for things like networking and standard templates libraries and file OS management. But this also includes a feature-rich set of tooling to really effectively utilize that directly deployable source code. So starting with our integrated development environment, or IDE, Qt Creator, which allows you to write your application in several languages. Now, our framework is primarily based in C++ and our own declarative markup language, QML. But there are several other language bindings that the framework supports, as well as Creator itself, such as Python, JavaScript, and HTML, depending on which libraries you're using and where you're deploying. Now, Qt Design Studio is our full 2D and 3D design suite. It allows you to import your assets from a variety of standard design tools such as Adobe, Sketch, Figma, as well as some 3D tools like Maya and Blender, among others. And once you're in Design Studio, you can take a more designer-centric approach to manipulating your graphical application by adding scenes, timeline-based animations, and more. Now, Design Studio will auto-generate QML source code based on your imported design and those animations that you've added, and allow for a very smooth handoff to your development and QA teams for deployment to your target platform. Now, if you guys have any additional questions around the framework or the libraries and modules that we offer, I'm going to put my contact information at the end of this webinar. So you, of course, can reach out directly to me, or you can head over to Qt.io and take a look at some of our tooling and what we offer there as well. All right, so let's jump into the agenda here, and we're going to start by talking about the state of the embedded industry, specifically this Forrester study commissioned by Qt and the white paper titled Smarter Products Need Smarter Delivery, Increasing Innovation and Driving Growth by Modernizing a Digital Product Delivery. And so I've got a link down to the white paper here. I can provide that link after the webinar as well. And so the study, we had Forrester, they went and surveyed 262 embedded device and connected product development decision makers from various enterprises around the globe, small, medium, and large. And there were really two key points that came out of this study. Number one, it's got to be digital and it has to be connected. And two, the customer needs to be at the center of the development practices. And let's talk about why that is. So sort of the first key finding that came out of this was traditional development practices are just insufficient at meeting these consumer demands. A lot of the push for change comes from consumer expectations that are driven by this sort of dynamic world we operate in. And this is nothing new, right? Everybody sort of expects it to look and act and feel like a smartphone. And so these evolving experiences of the mobile and web worlds are really moving at a pace that's difficult to match with our embedded devices. And when they looked at the customer expectations in the study, it sort of boiled down to these three. Number one, it's got to be easy to use. Two, it's got to be continuously improved. And lastly, number three, it's got to be not only connected, but also secure. And so this really requires a shift in several areas of our development practices. Number one, it's just not enough to design your product in a bubble based on sort of this single market trend snapshot at the beginning of your development effort. The product needs to continue to evolve up until launch to ensure that when you release it, it is in fact on trend. And to drive a more direct engagement, we've got to bring that smartphone experience to the product. Now, this is known to be significantly more impactful to your customers' brand loyalty when you disassociate your experience from sort of those hundreds of other apps on their phone. So it is beneficial in more ways than one. Now, following the launch, you need to have a plan in place for that continual evolution of the product in the field. And that forces the adoption of a more dynamic software development lifecycle. Of course, customers want security fixes, they want new features, and they absolutely want sort of this cohesive integration with products that you launch further down the road. And to do this successfully, you need to have the customer at the center of innovation to understand what value do they expect to get from the product actually being connected. And as you uncover that, it's important to keep in mind security needs to be a priority, right? As you're providing an entry point to not only their life, but also their personal data. You need to be prepared to handle the support burden that comes with this. So there's a lot that happens when you connect a device, from the data collection, the increased customer engagement, and of course the troubleshooting, right? So great support through the documentation, agile product updates, web and phone assistance are all really key on delivering a best-in-class customer experience. And then lastly, we can't overlook sort of these most recent factors pushing this impetus for change, right? The supply chain crisis. Thank you, COVID-19 and the pandemic. We need these smarter development processes that can adapt to the supply chain shocks, the chip shortages, and keep our pace of product delivery moving forward. Other findings in the study included the organizational and cultural challenges that are hindering this product development. Now, connected products, as we know, are fundamental to the ongoing customer engagement strategy. It's building that brand loyalty that I talked about before, right? And so here are sort of the 5 internal challenges that teams are facing in delivering these products. lack of collaboration to start it off. Development, design, and product teams, as well as sales and marketing, right, are working sort of in their own silos. And traditionally, what you're seeing is sort of these weak and inefficient cross-functional workflows. And so this is something that's continually being evangelized, right, by core members of the organization, really looking for tools that can break down these walls and solve these challenges. Now, each one of these teams, right, they're generally focused on their own goals, and there's really a lack of shared objectives among them. As far as the processes as these teams interact, just internally with themselves, but also with each other, processes for buying, for testing, for sharing your development results, or gathering feedback are often slow or antiquated or just generally inefficient. And as you do start to establish some of your platforms and you start to roll these products out, there is a tremendous difficulty in scaling that initial experience. And we'll talk more about why that is when we sort of get to how the different platforms impact UI design. And then finally, you've got developer burnout. And I think that this is something that a lot of developers can relate with, certainly the ones that I've been talking to recently. You've got all of these porting efforts, all of this time spent on moving existing platforms or redoing what you've already done as you're trying to innovate and roll out something new. There is a huge shortage of talent right now in the embedded industry specifically. And as we continue to put more devices out, it takes away from our existing bandwidth, right? So that lack of bandwidth and all these increasing asks are starting to burn out the engineering groups. Now, when we talk to the participants in the survey, 79% of them, so the vast majority of them, said that one or more of these challenges is directly impacting their product delivery. And almost a third of them said these challenges cause delays from 7 months to over a year, which is absolutely insane when you think about it in sort of the context of maybe a typical consumer product development cycle, right? Maybe it's 9 to 12 months, 18 months at the longest. When you're looking at those types of delays happening to almost 1 in 3 teams, you're essentially doubling your product development window, which is a crazy amount of time. Not to mention a missed market window, right? So let's come back here and kind of summarize this key point around customer centricity that I touched on before, because it really is the overarching message within the white paper. Now, 7 out of 10 decision makers in the study called out customer experience as their number one measure for success. That can't be ignored. That's a tremendous statistic right there. And when they laid out the key metrics for this success, it started with the UX, right? It's got to be intuitive and it's got to be consistent. And that's not just in the context of maybe one product in future releases or one product in your mobile companion app. That's across the board. Your website, your different product tiers within the ecosystem, your companion app, all of it has to bring sort of the same exceptional experience. And this really requires quality and reliability to be paramount, right? The product needs to work as expected and it needs to keep working. That's a critical part of the customer experience. And lastly, you need to keep in mind the support burden that comes with a continually evolving product, especially a connected one. So to minimize the impact to the product margins, you need to make your product as easy to maintain as possible. And again, keeping that focus on quality. So let's move to the next agenda item here, and we'll talk about how platform impacts UI design. I do encourage you guys, go download that white paper, read more about the challenges that other product teams around the world are facing. There's some great statistics in it. Some of them might ring true to your own team. It's definitely worth a read. Again, the link for that is in the presentation. If you want to reach out to me directly, I can point you guys to it. So moving on again to how the platform is impacted by UI design. Now, firstly, we know platform can limit the design performance in general, right? And I'm not only talking about the speed of execution as you get a more or less capable processor, but the user interface and that experience that comes with it is really forced to adapt to the different constraints. And so whether you're starting with your premium experience or your mass market kind of low end, as you scale in either direction, each platform development team, they might work within a different environment, and they're going to need to adapt these UI UX designs to their very unique tooling. Now, with traditional methods, assets and a design spec are sort of tossed over the wall, And then dev teams are often forced to manually code and recreate it, often falling short of the initial design vision. And this is where you get those highly iterative and very painful back and forth workflows between the two teams, where frustrations start to build on both sides, and it's just generally bad for the organization as a whole. And then the end result of all this typically ends up with a inconsistent or poorly performing UI, which ultimately translates to a bad customer experience, right? And remember, 70% of these decision makers have that as their number one metric for success. So we obviously don't want that. Now, in the context of kind of multi-platform products and Qt specifically, there's really no reason to use these traditional methods anymore. With Qt's ability to import your design directly from native design tools and generate this pixel perfect UI code automatically, those iterations should be fewer, they should be more efficient, and they should largely be focused on the addition of new features, your differentiation, your special sauce. So now that we've covered how the UI is impacted by platforming, let's look at the top 5 trends to kind of watch as we wrap up 2021 and move into 2022 here. And then after, we'll sort of apply these to our specific use case of the multi-platform smart oven demo. So first is mixed interaction, right? And this is moving beyond touch, integrating voice and gesture combined with visual aids, so the UI sort of guiding you through naturally. Second is simplification and optimization, right? So this is moving to less thinking action towards more natural behavior, a cleaner, simpler UI with the things that the user wants to do first kind of upfront and center. Then you've got 3D graphics and elements that you're incorporating into the application to deliver this more sort of immersive experience, right? And we'll talk about what some of those might be in a second. And then personalization. And this one I can't understate. I think that this is a really powerful part of moving to a digital experience. And this is different from customization. This is actually your user interface tailoring itself to feel as though the content has been created especially for the customer. And so I always use sort of the microwave as the example of this, right? I got a microwave. It's got a bunch of numbers on it. It's got some presets and some other functions like a timer. And when I think about the ones that I use the most often, it's quick start. It's setting a timer. And maybe it's one of the recipe buttons like popcorn, right? For date night, watching Netflix. I've got sort of this static, more classic keypad interface, right? And I've got a lot of wasted real estate with that. And in addition to that, some of my functions are actually kind of nested down within these menus that I've got to navigate through this segmented display. It's not the best experience. Now, when you move to something digital, that's where the story gets really powerful, and you can start to look at what elements of the screen and what features are the users actually engaging with most often. And now, if the product's connected, you can take that feedback and you can spin that into a release that you could apply to the mass user base if you see some commonalities across everybody. But for me as the individual user, you can start to rearrange the UI dynamically to put those most used functions up front, which I think is a really powerful, really powerful engagement strategy and just sort of this beautiful interaction, right? And now lastly, we've got animation. And this is, again, bringing that mobile smartphone experience to the device. They want it to look like a phone, talk like a phone, walk like a phone. And so you can accomplish this through mobile-like animations and interactions that are smooth and pleasing, but also helpful in navigating through the UI. And so I'll give you guys some concrete examples of what some of these look like in terms of the actual user interface and the aesthetic. So incorporating those 3D elements, right? This could be icons. It could be actual product representations. So as you see here in the kind of the mobile companion app for the smartphone demo, you've got this nice steamy pizza when it's cooking, it's rotating, it's looking quite delightful. You can't wait to rip open the oven and check it every 5 minutes. It's a much more engaging experience, right? And then in addition to this, you can also do 3D transitions, and I'm not talking old school PowerPoint flipping, maybe something that's a little bit more beautiful and elegant than that. Next, we've got Glassmorphism. So this is a big one we saw this year, right? This is that kind of blurred, frosted glass effect. You've got elements of the UI kind of multi-layered and floating in space, and next to each other. You need a vivid background with this typically to really make it pop, and often you'll see it accomplished with these very subtle light borders around it to distinguish the elements from each other, in addition to shadows, right, for layering, but to give it kind of that cut glass effect. And then you've got Neumorphism. This is another big one we saw this year, and this is sort of that minimal design aesthetic where buttons and cards and other elements of the UI have this plastic extruded look. They look like they're coming out of sort of the base material of the app, and they're often mimicking sort of these real world textures, right, like plastic, for example. Of course, typography, right? So it's not just what you say, it's how you're saying it, with bold and easy to read fonts, a decent amount of white space, the language and what you're actually saying within your application needs to be clear and intuitive to the user and actually help guide them and effectively kind of communicate with the device, if you will. And then you've got microcopy, right, which is sort of this whole augmentation to your brand's language and style, where the words on the user interface, what you're actually saying, maybe you're incorporating a little bit of humor to it, a little bit of spice. It's something that's really tailored to your specific brand language, and it builds on top of that experience. It makes you unique in the industry, where there might be some humor in it, like I said, or something that really fits kind of the overall language of perhaps your website or the mobile app. Then, of course, we've got dark mode and adaptive brightness, right? So this is when I sit down and start scrolling through Instagram or Reddit at night. I don't want my phone to blind me, right? I want it to be aware of sort of the ambient light in the room and adjust accordingly. With dark mode, it's all about that high contrast, maximizing readability, and of course a modern look, as we see more and more applications and web interfaces moving to this kind of dark theme. It's got a more modern aesthetic to it. And then lastly, again, that smartphone experience, right? Bringing mobile looking animations and transitions that give it the app look and feel in the context of embedded. So let's look at how some of these trends are applied to your different platform tiers. And we'll start with the low end tier, kind of your basic UI design. This might be running on a microcontroller. You've got some modern aesthetics in there, right? You've got capable design tools, and MCUs in terms of graphics are coming up and capabilities. You can check out Qt for MCUs for that. You might have Neumorphism going on. You might have a dark theme. You've got some custom icons in there and some realistic looking textures. Beyond that, maybe some simple transitions and animations, right? Whatever your processor is capable of. Now, you move up to the mid-range, a slightly more advanced UI design. This could be a high-end MCU with full graphics hardware acceleration built in, or it could be a slimmed-down application processor. And you've got everything that comes with the low end. You start to introduce stuff like high-res photos and images, maybe some 3D micro animations, and all of these transitions get a lot smoother as you get better hardware acceleration packed in there, or just a more capable processor. And then finally, you got the premium. This is your best of the best, your high-end platform. And you've got a truly advanced UI design. You've got everything from low and mid, and perhaps you start to incorporate things like video. And it could be a live workout being streamed. It could be a walkthrough cooking class. It could be a video call with some of your friends and family, whatever it is in this context. And that gives you kind of the full spread of utilizing all of these different trends that we just covered. So now let's look in the context of the smart oven demo, right? So of course, we've got touchscreen interaction. We're moving to this digital experience with an enhanced UI. We've got the mixed integration, so we're incorporating voice and gesture and visual aid, with certain elements kind of guiding you to, hey, this is the next step that you want to take. You also have a better engagement through this guided cooking experience, right? So step-by-step recipes and instructions that is really applicable to any one of the platforms. And then you've got sort of an overall smart product. The whole cooking experience itself evolves as you begin to build in sensors with some maybe edge intelligence, or you do some processing on the cloud and bring some actions back down. But you've got tracked and auto-regulated cooking modes, right? Hey, I'm cooking bread. It sets the timer automatically. It sets the temperature automatically, and all you have to do is click go. You've of course got a mobile companion app with that, maybe a kitchen smart hub or your digital voice assistants on the counter. All of these things are interacting together. You've got some really more kind of advanced elements like camera integration for food recognition. That might be to peek in while you're at the grocery store, or maybe even through AI and ML advancements to kind of recognize what you got going on in there and generate a grocery list. Of course, there's increased connectivity. We see that a lot of these elements I just touched on in the fridge and the microwave starting to sort of expand through the kitchen. And all of these devices are not just smart and connected, but interacting with each other. And maybe so the fridge knows what's in there and you get a recipe on the oven or the mobile app based on what you got available. And then, of course, lastly, the social interaction, right? And social and gamification in all these applications is something that's kind of growing like wildfire. You got virtual cooking experiences, tutorials, master classes, being able to set your device remotely, and then, of course, sharing things like grocery lists with your friends and family. So let's move on and we'll do the demo here. I'll show you guys a couple tiers of the app. So it is a smart oven. We cover 3 different platform tiers, a low end, a medium, and a high. 2 of those are MCU. One of them is application or MPU processor based. And then we've got a mobile companion app that is built with Qt for Android. Okay, so here we have Qt Creator, and this is Qt's integrated development environment for those of you that are seeing it for the first time. And with the few minutes that we have left here, I'm briefly going to run through 2 of the platforms available for our smart oven demo. And as I said before, we cover 4 platforms in total. There's a low-end, mid-range, high-end, and a companion app that's built with Qt for Android. And the purpose of this demo was to showcase how you can start with an application that leverages the latest UI UX trends and pretty seamlessly scale that project across several different tiers using Qt. Now, I've selected to showcase 2 ends of the spectrum here, so the high end and the low end. Now, the low is intended to run on an MCU like a Cortex M4, and the high end is intended for an application processor or desktop, perhaps in the real use case, a wall-mounted tablet or a kitchen hub like we discussed in the presentation. Now, you've all seen the screenshots of the companion app and the high end earlier in the webinar, so you should recognize kind of the aesthetic as I pull it up and some of those trends we talked about. So let's start with the low end, actually. Pretty simple user interface. If you guys can see it, we've kind of got this pulsing start icon in the middle here. Again, one of those visual aids that lets you know kind of where to touch and where to begin interacting. We've got a pretty simple user interface here. Again, it's dark theme. It's showcasing that new morphism, that plastic extruded look. We've got our temperature and our timers here, so we could dive into either one of these and set them, add 10 minutes here, maybe 30 minutes, and click start, and that timer will begin to start counting down. Alternatively, we can come into some preset programs here, and this is going to be a swipe touch capable screen, right? So we can kind of scroll through some of the programs we have. Let's select meat, and we'll go back and we see that the timer's been updated. We are representing our kind of mode of operation here with this icon in the center, and our temperature is set to 175. In addition to that, we've got some other functionality, so we can see we're in grill from that icon, lock, clean, defrost, some of the other functions that you'd expect to get out of your appliance. Now, if we bring up our high-end application, you should see some commonalities here right away, right? So if we come back to our start menu, number 1, we've got the same sort of aesthetic here with the time and a very simple visual aid to begin in the middle. Now, if I click that, we come into sort of a more spread out. We've got a lot more real estate here, but you can see the overall UI is roughly the same. We've got the same icons for our programs over here, our timer functionality and temperature in the middle. Again, dark theme, and all of our preset functions to the right. Now, if I click meat, it's going to start my timer, set my temperature the same, and put me in grill mode. I can kick that off. The other interesting thing that you can see, oh, hey, we got some of the 3D incorporation going on here. So we've got our lovely steak looking delightful. It's a little raw, but maybe not for some of you. Now, if you come over to this functionality on the side, this is where we start to incorporate other parts of the ecosystem, right? This is our premium tier. We're able to connect with other devices, either over Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. In our settings menu, we could provision that. We've got the adaptive brightness controls here. And the other thing that you'll notice is we've got these cooking experiences down below. So leveraging Qt Web Engine, we're actually able to embed video from YouTube directly into the application. So to come back one more time to look at kind of our MCU, again, you're going to see a lot of commonalities across this entire UI, and all of these assets were able to be directly leveraged, right? We were able to bring these in from the native design tools into Qt Design Studio, begin to lay out our UI and tweak it, and then bring that into Creator and deploy to our specific target. Okay, and that is the demo. Sorry, I had to really rush through that one, guys, with the time that we had left. But again, these images will be available for download for you guys to click around and explore yourselves. Thank you again so much for joining the webinar today. Again, my name is Harrison Donahue, Strategic Account Manager for the IoT at the Qt company. I've got a couple other resources here I'd encourage you guys to go take a look at and download. Number one, we got a hands-on training, and we have a 100% promo code for those who are viewing the webinar today, so you can get the access to that course absolutely free. And then we've got an additional white paper on these UI UX trends that you can go ahead and download. Thanks very much for joining. Have a great day.